pyramids can be found on both sides of the Atlantic. But were they built by descendants of the city of Atlantis? Pyramids, when one hears that term, there are a few images that likely come to mind. Perhaps the pyramids of Giza are set in the sands of Egypt, or the Mayan pyramids are hidden in the jungles of Mesoamerica. These massive structures arguably form some of the most iconic images of archaeological sites. Not only are these fascinating structures to archaeologists and historians, but also to the general public, most of whom would like to know, who made them and how were they made? However, there are a group of people who see these structures and begin with a different question. Why are there pyramids in different parts of the world? It is a question that more or less skips over the who and how, but nevertheless has been around for nearly 100 years. To answer this question, modern-age mythology surrounding the pyramids of the world and their origin has evolved, which, in general, involves an ancient civilization from a continent known as Atlantis. Since there is no codified version of mythology, the story can only be summarized. Generally, the mythology goes that around 11,500 years ago, the continent of Atlantis was populated by an advanced civilization. The Greek philosopher Plato, in his works Timaeus and Critias, argued that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules as a great island in the sea. The island was described as being greater in size than Libya and Asia together, and was powerful enough to attack Europe and Asia. At one point in the distant past, civilization was wiped out by a great earthquake that turned the sea into an impassable muddy bank. From this collapsed civilization, it is believed that the survivors traveled across the globe, where they resettled and lived. From these remnants of Atlantis arose the pyramids that are found across the globe, and their similarities in architecture can be explained by the cultures sharing a common origin in Atlantis. Such a hypothesis is based on the cultural transmission of ideas through diffusion, a concept not unheard of in modern history. During the height of colonialism at the end of the 19th century, Westerners brought with them ideas regarding architecture, administration, farming, and so on. The construction of houses or administration centers in European styles for Westerners acts as physical evidence of their presence in the region. While architectural buildings would not be exact replicas of what could be found in Europe, the buildings nevertheless reflect the origin of the European power building them. Many of the Europeans that had colonies across Africa, Asia, and the South Seas, like the Belgians, French, British, Germans, and Americans, left behind buildings that resembled European architecture. The idea that pyramidal structures were similarly made by Atlanteans was pondered in the 19th century by Ignatius L. Donnelly. He was an American congressman, but he also viewed himself as a scientist. In 1882 he wrote Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, which proposed that the catastrophic event that ended Atlantis was none other than the Great Flood found in the Bible. Donnelly proposed that the events described by Plato were factual and that humankind first became civilized at Atlantis. He also drew upon the similarities between the Phoenician alphabet, Mayan, and Egyptian hieroglyphs to show that these stemmed from an original Atlantean alphabet. In Chapter 5, he takes up the idea that the pyramids found on both sides of the Atlantic were the result of Atlanteans. Using archaeological knowledge from the time, he describes the structures of the Mayan, Aztec, and Egyptian pyramids and even proposes that the artificial earth mounds found in the United States and England are connected. At the end of the chapter, he concludes by asking the reader, "Is it possible to suppose all these extraordinary coincidences to be the result of an accident?" He answers this by stating that it would be similar to assuming the American and English forms of government spontaneously developed and shared no relationship or descent. On the other side of the Atlantic, the Scottish folklorist Lewis Spence carried on Donnelly's line of thought. In his 1927 work, The History of Atlantis, Spence covered the Atlantis civilization in a manner mimicking scientific, ethnographic accounts from the time. Topics covered in this work were the history of Atlantean sources, the races of people that inhabited the continent, their traditions, daily life, political structure, religion, animal life, and so on. Chapter 15 is dedicated to the colonies of Atlantis, which he placed in one form or another in Africa, Iberia, Crete, Egypt, and the Americas. Pyramids of the world. In the New World, there were at least three major civilizations that developed pyramidal structures: the Teotihuacan, the Mayans, and the Aztecs. The earliest civilization was the one that created the site of Teotihuacan, which reached its peak between 400 and 450 CE. Archaeologists are still unsure of which culture created the site, with some believing the Toltec civilization was responsible. However, it was later found that the Toltec civilization came about centuries after the height of Teotihuacan. At the moment, it is unknown who built the city. The city consists of numerous pyramids laid out on a grid pattern. The largest pyramid is known as the Pyramid of the Sun and is surrounded by numerous smaller pyramids. The Pyramid of the Sun is 71 meters high, with a base of approximately 230 meters, and was built around 200 CE. The second largest pyramid, the Pyramid of the Moon, rises 43 meters with a base of 130 by 156 meters. This archaeological complex can still be visited today and is a popular tourist attraction located only 40 kilometers from Mexico City. Teotihuacan. While it is unknown who built Teotihuacan, it is known that the Maya civilization existed during this time, although they were located further south in the modern-day regions of Guatemala, Belize, and the Yucatan Peninsula. The classical Maya period is marked by culture-raising monuments with dates, and the construction of urban city centers. It was also around this time, in 378 CE, that Teotihuacan invaded the Mayan city Tikal and deposed their ruler through violence. The new Teotihuacan-backed ruler installed, Yaxnunahian I, brought the region to the heights of power. Located in Tikal are numerous monumental pyramids that reach out of the jungle. One of the most iconic is Temple 1, built around 732 CE. The pyramid rises a steep 55 meters and is topped with a shrine that was likely devoted to King Jasachan Kawil I, who ruled from 682 to 734 CE. The largest pyramid in Tikal is known as Temple 4 and is believed to be the funerary temple for Yikinchan Kawil. The pyramid, built around 741 CE, rises approximately 65 meters with a large rectangular base and a large shrine at the top. The Aztec civilization, which the Spanish encountered when they came to Tenochtitlan, modern-day Mexico City, in 1519, also had pyramidal structures. These pyramids were constructed between 1325 and 1487 CE. Unlike the Teotihuacan and Mayan pyramids already mentioned, much of these Aztec structures have been destroyed, and their materials were reused to create churches and other structures. Much of what we know about these pyramids are based on what the Spanish recorded during their initial encounters with the Aztecs. The most important temple is the Templo Mayor, although there were numerous other smaller pyramids. The pyramid had a rectangular base and rose approximately 60 meters high. At the top were two shrines devoted to Aztec deities. To access these shrines, two sets of staircases were constructed. According to Spanish accounts, these shrines served as the place for human sacrifices to Aztec deities. Centuries later, archaeological excavations in Mexico City revealed offerings and tributes as well as evidence confirming the role of the structures in human sacrifice. The mighty pyramids of Egypt. On the other side of the Atlantic are the iconic pyramids of Egypt. The most famous are the pyramids of Giza, which consist of three large pyramids, associated with smaller pyramids, and the Sphinx of Giza. The Great Pyramid was built between 2580 and 2560 BC, and was nearly 150 meters tall when it had its original smooth limestone covering. According to the Greek historian Herodotus in 450 BC, the pyramid belonged to the pharaoh Khufu. This was confirmed more than 2 millennia later when archaeologists began excavating the surrounding cemeteries that contained family members of Khufu. While inside the pyramid, hieroglyphs containing Khufu's name were found. The nearby, slightly smaller pyramid came later. It was built around 2570 BC by Khafre to be his tomb. Although the pyramid is slightly smaller, it was built upon a higher bedrock which made it appear taller than Khufu's pyramid. The third major pyramid of the Giza complex is the Pyramid of Menkaure, which originally stood at around 65 meters. All three pyramids feature systems of passageways that were made for the burial of the pharaoh. While this is the most famous complex of pyramids in Egypt, they are not the oldest. The earliest pyramid is found at Saqqara and was built between 2686 and 2613 BC. Unlike the other pyramids, this one does not have linear sloping sides, but rather steps like a layered cake. Did you know this? In 1679, the Swedish scientist Olis Rudbeck published Atlant, a 4-volume work in which he attempted to prove that Sweden was the original site of Atlantis and that all human languages were descended from Swedish. He was considered authoritative in his homeland, and many outside of Sweden found Rudbeck's arguments convincing. So, maybe the pyramids originate from Atlantis? Atlantis, an island nation mentioned in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias, has been an object of fascination among Western philosophers and historians for nearly 2,400 years. Plato 424 to 328 BC describes it as a powerful and advanced kingdom that sank, in a night and a day, into the ocean around 9600 BC. Since the 19th century, there has been renewed interest in linking Plato's Atlantis to historical locations. Maybe these pyramids are the result of an Atlantean civilization that lived thousands of years ago and sent people to colonies in the Americas and northern Africa. Are these structures physical evidence of a common building structure that the Atlanteans kept with them as they traveled the world? What are your thoughts? Please leave a comment below the video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
If you enjoy my YouTube videos and would like to support me so that I can create more free content, you can now buy me a coffee either as a one-off or a monthly treat. Thank you so much. I appreciate each and everyone who supports me and my channel.